On today's World Insight, in the wake of Washington's Operation Midnight Hammer, which targeted Iran's nuclear facilities in Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan, the Middle East faces its most dangerous escalation in decades. Is America containing a nuclear threat or unleashing one?
Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm your host, Tian Wei. Tonight, the world stands on edge. Iranian nuclear facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, once symbols of the Tehran's atomic ambitions, now lies smoldering in the wake of targeted bombings under the code name Operation Midnight Hammer, that at least is according to some media reports. The strikes have rattled the region, with Israel taking credit and the United States firmly at its side. But this isn't just another military campaign. These were nuclear sites, and the risk of radiation leaks, environmental catastrophe, and open regional war has never left more real. And here is how the three key players, the US, Israel, and Iran, responded.
Of course, the door for diplomacy should be always keep open, but this is not the case right now.
This cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
Despite of the rhetoric coming from some political leaders, global reactions reflect deepening alarm. UN Secretary General Guterres condemns the bombings as a dangerous escalation, threatening global security. China strongly condemns US attack on Iran, said Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. EU leaders push for dialogue. Russia accuses the US of starting a new war, while Arab states demand de-escalation as militant groups mobilize. With Iran vowing revenge and the U.S. entrenched in a widening conflict, two critical questions loom. So what would direct American military intervention mean for the Middle East? And if diplomacy collapses and red lines vanish, which is likely, what catastrophe chain reaction is likely to follow? Let's loop in our panelists. To unpack what this moment means for the Middle East, for global security, and America's role in the conflict, I'm joined in Beijing by Zhou Bo, Senior Colonel and Senior Fellow from the Center of International Security and Strategy from Tsinghua University. In Shanghai, Joseph Gregory Mahoney, Professor of East China Normal University. And in Damascus, Talib Ibrahim, political analyst and Middle East expert based in Syria. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Now, according to the latest news coming from Press TV, which is based in Iran, Iranian Major General earlier suggested that the country's parliament has reached a conclusion that the Strait of Hormuz should be closed. But now, for the moment, the action has not been taken. According to the media report, the final decision will lie with the Supreme National Security Council of Iran. Once again, that is a source coming from the Press TV based in Iran, talking about the possible closure of Hormuz. Now, your immediate response, Professor Ibrahim. Professor Ibrahim, can you hear me?
Sorry. Yes, I think this is a very dangerous escalation, and I think that Iranian choosing to go to the end of this game. It is a very dangerous, and I think to close the Hormuz Strait was one of the Iranian choices, and I think that Iranian will go to further choices because that the American step last day destroyed all the possibilities of reaching a diplomatic resolution and a diplomatic settlement for this crisis. And I think we will witness in the upcoming days more and more escalation of the Iranian side.
we are already hearing more vows of escalation. First of all, this strike against the nuclear sites by the United States directly is already quite a signal. Now, to you, Professor Gregory Mahoney, you are an American professor. Tell me more about your immediate response about the latest decision suggested by Press TV about the Hormuz.
Well, I agree. It is a clear indication that Tehran is not going to capitulate or unconditionally surrender as demanded by Donald Trump. And to be honest with you, I think this is exactly what he hoped to avoid. I think he hoped to get in, do these 3 hits, hold a gun to their head and say, okay, that's it. And then he could go back to his political base and say that he wasn't going to get sucked into this sort of conflict. Unfortunately, he has now put the ball in Tehran's court, and they will be able to escalate in ways that will complicate the matter for him politically in terms of his domestic audience, and certainly run greater risk for U.S. involvement.
Senior Colonel Joe, what does that mean for the region and including for others around the world? We understand the UN Security Council already had an urgent meeting. Meanwhile, we're also seeing a NATO summit the coming week. What are we talking about here with the possibility of further military escalation and nuclear leaking possibilities if further strike happened, and as well the closure of the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, I fully understand how Iranian would be feeling, but I still have some doubts whether they could really block Hormuz Strait, because that would be unprecedented. Even during the Cold War, neither the United States nor Soviet Union tried to block international straits. You remember at that time they were just enemies, right? So because blockade of Hormuz would be very much consequential in that every day 20 million barrels of crude oil would come out of Strait of Hormuz. So if Iran does that, actually Iran is blocking its own economy. Yeah, so this would be very, very much consequential, not only for other people but also for the Iran government. As for the leak of these kind of dangerous radioactive materials, we do not have evidence so far. So we don't just know whether the U.S. has really hit the target, with such a precision. So all this remain to be seen. But as a result, of course, this is unprecedented in the Middle East.
Right.
The ramification is still, boiling. So we don't know the result. But
Right.
apparently, the U.S. right now is involved in 2 wars at the same time. That actually would very much affect the prescribed ambition to come to the Indo-Pacific, to focus in this region, because that's was said to be the top priority.
I want to thank the 3 of you, in fact, for discussing our topics today based on facts, not assumption. I really appreciate that. Having said that, though, it is already a fact that the U.S. has entered this war, quote unquote, against Iran directly. That is at least the title used by some of the leading media organizations in the headlines. So obviously, Professor Mahoney, a president of peace. For his very first term, he was the very first U.S. president, didn't start a war during his first term. Now, actually has went directly into a military conflict. What does that say?
Well, I think we have to be cautious. I think a lot of what he did in Trump 1.0 set the table for the things that we're seeing now in terms of his posturing towards Iran, blowing up the previous agreement, and moving to position Israel for several of the things that it did that came after. But I think the bottom line is that the U.S. Has proven once again that it does not negotiate diplomatically in good faith, and will opportunistically attack those who act contrary to U.S. directives. And I think this attack once again demonstrates that any country that negotiates with the U.S. on any matter, whether related to trade, security, climate change, global health, and so on, does so at considerable risk. And this is why the responses that we've heard from the G7 members and other U.S. allies who are calling for Iran to come back to the negotiating table are completely disingenuous, above all because Trump has made it clear that there's no negotiation. The only acceptable response to him is complete surrender. So the bottom line is he didn't just bomb Iran, he bombed the negotiating table, he bombed international law, and he bombed his own promises to avoid these kinds of attacks on other countries. And the risk here for further escalation is very, very high.
Professor Ibrahim, how do the players and stakeholders in the Middle East are thinking about this? I mean, they are pretty torn in a way because they differently have an interesting relationship with the country of Iran, but at the same time, they do not want the conflict in the region to escalate much. So at this moment, what does Washington's action directly go militarily against Iran say to the regional players?
I think this is a very bad message from the United States because all the regional players except Israel, they want peace and they want to improve their economy. Now Iran has a good relations with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar, with the United Arab Emirates, and with Turkey, with all regional players except Israel. And I think that Benjamin Netanyahu now, who became a war maker in the Middle East, and he is the only one, he is the only man in the Middle East who wants this war. And this is a terrible mistake by the United States of America, while the American president is talking about peace and about ending the era of war in the United States policy. Now he's launching a very, very big war, and no one can expect what will happen next day. And I think that we are very close to a regional or maybe a world war. This is a terrible mistake, and all regional players are very much anxious, and they want to see an end to this military escalation and to come back to the negotiation table. And I hope that, personally, I hope that will happen, because think about the consequences on the international economy, in the international security, and in the international
I see.
world order. What happened after that?
Indeed. Senior Colonel Joe, earlier we saw the Iranian foreign minister talking to the foreign minister of some of the leading European countries. But eventually the negotiate table was not set, but rather bombed. Meanwhile, we also see China coming out condemning directly, very clearly, by the foreign ministry spokesperson about the actions taken by the United States. Now, your reaction to all of this?
Oh, I think the Chinese government rightly condemned this, right? But I think that is definitely needed. But apart from that, probably there aren't many things that we can do. China used to be part of the JCPOA, which actually have basically reached a kind of a deal, but Trump actually destroyed that. So
During
that
his
is a
first
pity.
term.
So think what we have already achieved, and think of the situation now. So it's really, really sad, because right now the Pandora box is really opened.
Right.
The fact is, so we might be thinking about this in a very complicated way, but I could just think about it in a simple way. That is whether Iran would have more interceptors, or would Israel have more interceptors, or would Iran have more missiles, right? It is highly unlikely that Israel can just conquer Iran on land, because actually they are separated by several countries. And then would the United States send troops to set foot on Iran? Of course, it is impossible. So therefore, Iran's military capabilities would not be fundamentally crippled. It can still produce missiles, and so that means they can still fire missiles, on Israel from time to time at the time of their own choice. So that is a kind of a Pandora box already opened. We don't know where they're going, but that is the situation.
Yeah, Senior Colonel Joe, I want to ask you further, because this is not just any military conflict. It has a lot to do with the nuclear security that we are talking about, nuclear safety as well. Today, we heard the so-called claim of success by the Trump administration bombing the Fordo and some of the other areas without giving details as to what the result is. Now, we also know Iran at this moment, its contact with the rest of the world seem to be the least at its level. So how much really it takes for the rest of the world to understand what exactly is going on, and how do you see some of the military weapons used by the United States during this round of strikes is likely to do, given its publicly known functions?
Well, you see, Iran is fundamentally different from DPRK. DPRK said that they would want to develop a nuclear bomb even if they have to eat grass. But from the very beginning, Iran did not say that they're going to develop a nuclear bomb. And they insist that it is for peaceful use. But of course, there are some doubts about it. Why? Because Iran is not a country short of energy, right? Because Iran is a large exporter of oil. So why would they just develop, nuclear energies? So there are some natural doubts about it. And even the Khamenei actually many years ago has actually made a decree saying that to develop a nuclear bomb is against Islam, right? So there is also kind of a sincerity. It seems to be kind of sincere in what he said. So, so that is why Iran has been
Right.
denying all this. But it seems that Americans' military operation uh, is very successful. So, of course, we have to wait and see. But anyway, so would snowball in the region, right?
Right.
Because
Of course, at
people
this
have
moment,
been
we also know there are conflicting, a judgment as to where Iran is in terms of quote unquote developing nuclear weapons, because IAEA reports certainly suggest that it is not yet the case and not that close to the case. Meanwhile, the intelligence official in the United States, in Washington, is suggesting similar. Well, the U.S. president is arguing against everybody with this military action. But the question really is, with the weapons being used, the public known functions, how much will they be able to penetrate the ground of some of the nuclear facilities, which we know is very much buried further into the ground? So, Senior Colonel Zhou, I know it takes a lot of specific expertise to make that judgment, but just from your perspective as a military expert, what do we need to know in order to have a final judgment?
Well, you see, apparently Israel doesn't have B-2 bombers, and Israel doesn't have the
Yeah.
bunker buster bomb, right? So for that means to destroy the facility deep down there in Fordo,
Yeah.
the United States has to send the pilots to do it themselves, and they have to throw in, yeah, the 30,000 pounds bomb, almost on the same targets. Yeah, so that is why they actually have sent, six B2
Yeah.
on the 12 sorties to strike on it. Yeah,
Right.
this is only something they can achieve.
Well, of course, it's a very complicated operation. We know there are a lot of details that actually would have something to do with the eventual result. We'll see how news will eventually come out regarding that. To you, Professor Ibrahim, about the region, we also know Iran at this moment, its allies like Hezbollah and Houthis already vowed to respond and also to retaliate. What does that mean with these kind of reactions and also the stakeholders in the region to the whole Middle East? After all, there's also the Gaza conflict that is ongoing.
I think there will be a great escalation. And as I said to you, I am very much worried about a very, very big regional war, which will extend from Yemen to Lebanon to Iran. And will be the greatest operation, military operative field in the history of the United States and even in in our century. So I think that Hezbollah and Houthi will help Iran, and they will launch their missile against Israel if they receive any sign from the Iranian side. And I think that now not only those, I think about the pro-Iran Iraqi military forces who are working inside Iraq, think about Syria. So all the region will go to unknown location and to unknown position after the strike.
Yeah.
And this is why, because of the policies of Donald Trump. And I think this is a responsible decision to bomb Iran was a very bad thing to be done. And the most important thing for superpowers is to keep international security and regional and international stability and to prevent wars, not to
Right.
launch war after war after war. And we are very much worried about our future, especially as a Syrian. I I witnessed war and I am praying every day to see in for any war in the world and to begin a new era of cooperation and coexistence with other
Well, I'm
nations,
afraid you're
other
going to be
people.
disappointed at this
You know,
moment. Yes, indeed. Professor Mahoney, on the other hand, what do you think this could mean for the region, which is already plagued by conflicts and also refugees, you name it, as a result of the Gaza conflict?
Well, unfortunately, this conflict is distracting us once again from what's happening in Gaza. There were more reports on Israeli attacks on aid workers today. It's distracting people from the conflict in Ukraine. And certainly, we now run the risk of Iranian retaliation. We've already seen Iran retaliate with strikes against Israel, multiple volleys in close intervals overnight. We've heard experts saying that this won't end quickly, that both Iran and Iranian proxies can strike U.S. targets. And it's unlikely that the Iranians will or even can politically and militarily speaking capitulate per Trump's demand. So I think that we're going to see this continue. Now, I'd like to pick up on one of the questions you asked Colonel Bowe a moment ago, and that is with regard to the assessment of whether or not the U.S. was able to destroy these sites. And I think it was very telling that in the immediate aftermath, right after the planes had left Iranian airspace, Trump was giving reports that the sites were completely destroyed. And I think we have to take that with a grain of salt, that we can't be sure. It usually takes more time. It takes satellite views and studies to determine whether or not those sites were in fact destroyed. But additionally, there are now reports that there were a number of unusual activity at the Fordo site ahead of the bombing, that there were a large number of trucks. And it may be possible that Iran moved all of its assets out of the Fordo and perhaps other areas to safer locations. And so if U.S. intelligence or Israeli intelligence comes to that conclusion, then we may say additional attacks on other parts of Iran, because they may start chasing these materials around, trying to destroy them.
Right. Senior Colonel Joe, now we know that the Iranian foreign minister is still traveling around the world, for example, going to Russia and also talking to other UN Security Council members as well. Now, what do you expect that this round of diplomatic talks likely to achieve, or provide us with any clues about what's next?
Well, certainly Iran can get a lot of sympathies from around the world, but that would not work really. The central question is whether this kind of a military strike on Iran would actually prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear weapon state. The answer is probably not, because first of all, Iran might just walk away from NPT treaty. And you see, nuclear technology actually is not something new. China even could develop a nuclear weapon in 1960. Now this is the 21st century. If they are, determined, like DPRK, eventually I believe it is highly unlikely that they could still develop a nuclear bomb. So by that time, then, so what have we been doing? Yeah, people will have to ask this question.
Right. One of the things I want to also have the views of Professor Ibrahim from the region as well on this.
I think Iran has the right to have its peaceful nuclear technology, and I think it's the right for any nation. And Iran is like other nations, want to improve its economy and to improve its infrastructure by using this technology, not by using the nuclear weapons at all. But what is happening now is very much different from what we used to see. And I think now Iran will think about other choices. And I am very much worried that Iran may withdraw from the NPT and begin its own nuclear military program. And no one can expect what will happen tomorrow, because after the closure of Strait Hormuz, everything now is possible in the mind of decision makers in Iran. I hope that diplomacy work actively, and we may see, and I hope that we may see an end to this madness which is striking Middle East now.
Right. Besides what we are talking about here, when it comes to military, strategic as well as future impacts on the rest of the world. We know already Iran is a country that hosts 3.2 million refugees. Many of them were coming from Afghanistan originally, which was a place earlier experienced military attacks by the United States, of course, decades ago. And now, as a result of this, things will be even more chaotic when it comes to the humanitarian crisis that we are now on the ground in Iran and probably beyond. So we're going to bring some of the interviews about that by asking the spokesperson of UNHCR tomorrow in our program. But let me continue by asking you this, very important, that is, what is this specific escalation of military actions, particularly by the United States directly participating against Iran, mean for the future logic of relations between countries and mean for the logic of the U.S. Apparently going through its own internal debates about what the country should be about, mean for its future strategies dealing with others or enemies? Is it going to be rules of the jungle and that's it? Senior Colonel Joe.
Well, you see, when Donald Trump was re-elected, I was asked by so many journalists, how would his second term look like? I say I don't know what he's going to do next, right? But I'm very much confident by the end of his second term, America's whole credibility and image will be further tarnished. Yeah, and this seems to be the case. Yeah, because this kind of a double standard cannot be more obvious. I think there are a lot of discussion about whether U.S. has really declined or not. If you say they have ready to decline, Americans would have to admit. But it seems that this kind of flagrant invasion of another country, yeah, and this kind of unpredictability of a president who even wants to get a Nobel Prize, yeah, and there's a whole division of the United States domestically, and even on this attack, the division caused, yeah, even within his own party. This is chaotic, yeah. So we are heading in a more dangerous world. But at the same time, I believe the world is also trying to fathom, the future because we are now seeing the development of BRICS Plus. Why? Because nobody knows where it is going, but it's just like a train that is already moving. Everybody is afraid of not being able to catch the train. So that is why people see that there is another way out. So that is why this kind of organization are becoming more attractive. And that tells where the world international order is moving. It is shifting toward this region.
We are reaching the end of our show today, but I really want to thank the three of you for sharing with us your insights based on the facts we know. Senior Colonel Joe Bo, Professor Mahoney, Professor Ibrahim, thank you. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us. Bye.